Hi everybody, welcome. Today I'm going to be talking about loneliness versus aloneness and the art of being alone after surviving a narcissistic family system. And the reason why I want to talk about that today with you is because, if you come from a narcissistic family system and you've been scapegoated, then your narcissistic family instilled loneliness, a sense of loneliness within you from a very young age. Now, the way that this happens, first of all, is that, your narcissistic parent will have isolated you. They will not treat you the same way that they will treat other family members. They will sort of try and convince the world that they treat all their children the same through their mask wearing, but they don't. I'll give you an example of something that illustrates that. When I was a teenager, when I was young, quite young, my narcissistic mother used to always attach herself to this story about my sibling, about how smart he was, because when he was a baby, she taught him how to point to the alphabet very, very young. She always told the story that he had this alphabet letter, toy, this map thing, and then she taught him how to point to all the alphabet letters very, very young. And she was always very proud of this achievement. And while there was many stories, of course, that she would brag about for how wonderful the sibling was. But that particular story, I remember one time as a teenage girl, she would tell that story again. And I turned to her and I said, "How about me? Did you ever teach me anything? Do you have any stories like that about me?" Because she never told any stories about me, And then she turned to me and she said, "Nope, I did not do that with you," straight up. And then she got angry at me. "What are you insinuating? Why are you asking me such dumb questions? Are you insinuating something?" And that actually triggered her rage when I asked her if she did the same thing with me as she did with my sibling. And by the way, what's ironic is that when I was a kid, I had a hard time reading and writing. They actually put me in special classes to learn to read and write. And in my family, it was kind of like it became the normal that I was the dumb one. And that was something that followed me throughout my entire life, actually, through conversations, when my sibling became an adult and, the conversations that I would have with family members, it always followed me that, that it was normal that I didn't have a supportive parent as I went through school and such, because I wasn't so smart. I wasn't as smart. I didn't have good grades. So it's normal that I didn't have a supportive parent for the achievements that I wanted to achieve. So as a scapegoat, you grow up like this. You grow up watching, the golden child, or, basically strangers are treated better than you. Friends are treated better than you. They will watch TV and they will have empathy for whatever's happening on TV. And meanwhile, like at home, they have this child looking up to them that they're completely denying and ignoring and constantly criticizing, So this type of isolation, eventually what happens is that we develop a fear of being alone because we associate being alone with rejection, with abandonment, and with a lack of validation. So this fear of being alone becomes really deeply rooted, and we've been conditioned to believe that our worth and our value are tied to people's acceptance of us. The withholding of love and affection, right? Who here has received the silent treatment? Raise your hand, right? Narcissistic parents will withhold love and affection and emotional support completely from the scapegoat as a means to control them. And, they will deprive their own child of love and validation to punish and to control, to elevate themselves, to keep themselves, to keep that power position as parent up on top, and they make sure that that you're way down below when they it's a power position. They know that they have power to toy with the child. The child will do whatever they want for love. The child will do whatever the parent wants to receive love, and they know this. And so they utilize the withholding of love, the silent treatments, as weapons. They will weaponize those things. And so this means that as scapegoats, we develop the belief that we are not worthy of love unless there's other people present, and unless we can serve others, unless we can, give everything that we got for other people. Then, of course, there's the gaslighting and the manipulation. Gaslighting, again, the damages that gaslighting causes to a person. I think almost every single video I've made so far probably mentions the different ways in which gaslighting can affect a person. When you're gaslighted constantly by a narcissistic family system, you don't trust yourself, and you develop a fear of relying on yourself. You develop a fear of relying on yourself to make decisions for yourself. You don't, you become afraid to navigate life independently and to trust your own judgment. And this leads to a fear of solitude once again, because if there's nobody around, to validate you or help you figure out what's okay, what's not okay, then what? You're not taught that you can actually rely on yourself. And gaslighting teaches you that you can't rely on yourself because your memories are wrong, your judgment is wrong, your feelings are wrong, you are wrong overall, and you don't know what you're talking about. And it's this constant invalidation of your experiences. Well, you're taught that, your experiences have you're taught to believe that you are weak, that your experiences have no power, like you can't make your own decisions unless you get that validation from someone else, because you've been gaslighted so much. How do you trust yourself after that? And then, of course, there's the emotional coercion that we scapegoats have to go through. The enablers will constantly coerce us into remaining in a toxic relationship that is really, really hurtful and toxic. And they will use guilt, they will use fear, they will threaten to abandon, they will threaten to withdraw love, if you don't comply. And they will leave, they will disappear, they will leave us if we do decide to put our boundaries down, And so we are taught that our boundaries equals abandonment, and therefore being alone equals being abandoned. And so it becomes very, very difficult for us to appreciate this alone time because of how we have been conditioned to view aloneness. Now, there's a difference between loneliness and aloneness, okay? It's not the same thing, okay? Loneliness is a feeling of being isolated, okay? You feel sad, you feel empty, you feel like there's no connection. And by the way, you can feel lonely when you're surrounded by people. You don't just necessarily feel that when you're actually physically alone. You can be lonely even when you're surrounded by tons of people. And then there's aloneness. Now, aloneness, on the other hand, is a state of being. It's a choice. It's being alone without the feeling of being lonely. It's a decision to spend time, on your own in solitude, and pursue, personal interests, personal goals, inner peace, knowing that you have the freedom to lean on who you are and be as you are without any external influences, without needing any external influences to help you figure out what you want your life to be. So, aloneness can actually be a really positive experience because it gives you an opportunity for self-discovery and creativity and personal growth, which is what the narcissistic family system did not nurture within you. When you're lonely, that loneliness can really create much havoc within a person. Loneliness creates dependency on other people, okay? because it leads you to seek constant validation from others to fill that empty void that you constantly feel within yourself. It's the reliance on external validation. It perpetuates like a cycle that you're constantly feeling the need to seek for approval, and which prevents you from ever developing a sense of self-worth, And this leads me to unhealthy relationships. When you're consumed by loneliness, you will so easily jump into the wrong relationships because you're lonely. You will stay in horrible relationships because you're lonely, and because it feels like being alone is worse than being with a toxic person. Because you know that if you leave that person, there's nobody waiting for you, right? You come from a narcissistic family system, you have no family, you're alone. And you become really attached to people. And even if they're toxic, you might want to, well, I mean, I know I did, I stayed in terrible relationships for a long time just because I was so afraid of being alone. And loneliness can also drive you to suppress your own emotions rather than to confront them. You will constantly avoid, that emptiness that you feel within, that loneliness that your family taught you. And you may be living with a lot of pain and anger and sadness, and you're constantly looking for ways to distract yourself from that deep emptiness that your narcissistic family system put within you. I can recall in my life, I spent a good 10 years living abroad. I was low contact at that time, but I came back and went many times, And there was a point where I lived in Asia, and I was actually really alone for a good 3 years before I really connected before I made some meaningful relationships, And apart from going to work, I had no connections, I went to work, and then I was absolutely on my own in a foreign country, and I couldn't speak the language. And I dealt with it okay, in the sense that I developed routines, I developed hobbies, I went exploring. I used to go hiking up a volcano almost every weekend, and I distracted myself with a lot of like online gaming and stuff like that when I was alone in my little one-room apartment. I focused on myself, but even though that, I did okay in terms of hobbies and developing, learning new skills and so forth. The problem was that feeling of loneliness. Even though I was doing all those things, that feeling of loneliness really prevented me from fully experiencing the freedom that I actually had at the time. I didn't see it because I was so lonely. I was in such need to be loved. I really wanted somebody to love on such a deep level that everything I did it, but I was always sort of like, oh, maybe I'll meet someone here, maybe I'll find a group here, maybe I can belong here. It was like this constant mindset that I had, and that actually prevented me from really fully healing. Like today, it's not the same thing. When I am alone now, I fully embrace being alone, but at the time, it was the loneliness that really prevented me from, cultivating that inner peace. And because, the thing is, like, solitude, it actually provides a nurturing environment for cultivating inner peace. When we detach ourselves from any external distractions, and we create a sanctuary of stillness where we can find ourselves, we can find tranquility, we can actually start doing mindfulness practices, meditation, introspection, and allowing ourselves to connect with ourselves on like a super deep level, and learn to emotionally rely on ourselves, because maybe physically, you have a job and you have hobbies, But you also have to learn to emotionally rely on yourself and teach yourself that you are enough and that you can give yourself the love that you deserve, that your family did not give you. And when you're alone, what's important to do, one of the things that I didn't do at the time, which I advise you to do if you're in this situation, is create your sacred space. Look, your body is your temple and your living space is your castle. I don't care how small it is or where you are. Your body is your temple, your living space is your castle. And so create a sacred space just for yourself, that where you purposely do not allow as unsafe people in, even safe people, but really it's the purpose of you having a sacred space is, it's like it becomes your sanctuary where you can engage in activities that nourish your soul, activities that are meant for your personal growth. Having a sacred space is that it allows you to escape any outside expectations, distractions, demands, and it's a serene environment that is meant for your self-reflection and inner exploration. It's just for you, and it's so important for you to create a space like this and to utilize that space healthily, by surrounding yourself in that space. You surround yourself with things that you love just for you, things that help you connect to the earth, things that help you connect to yourself, where you create your artwork, where you create your music, where you make your goals, when you plan your goals, where you study, where you focus on your personal development. Having a sacred space, it will help you reconnect with yourself and gain clarity on a pretty profound level. So it's really important for you to respect the space that you're in. Don't invite just about anybody over. Really have a sacred space that is just for you. And I'll tell you a little story. When I was a teenager, I didn't have a sacred space, obviously, when I was still living in the system. But I found a little field. It was behind some gas station or something, not too far from our house. And so I would go there by myself sometimes. And when the sun came down and the nighttime started to when the nighttime came, fireflies would rise up above the grass, and I would be surrounded by fireflies, and I would stay there for like a good 45 minutes to an hour, just surrounded by these glowing fireflies. And that was like my secret space. I never invited anybody to come and see it. It was really, I would just sit there in the grass with these fireflies around me, and I would center myself there and create stories in my mind, and then I would go back into the house to face the narcissist again. But having that sacred space that was just for me, it was actually really, really, really helpful to have, for my own inner peace, So when you're alone, of course, it's really super important for you to practice emotional self-reliance. It's not enough just to be alone, but hobbies, like I said, it's good to have hobbies and to get creative and to focus on your goal. It's a perfect time. If you're alone, you get selfish and you focus fully on what you got to do to get yourself from A to B. Set yourself some goals. Visualize where it is that you want to be. Do you want to travel? Do you want to go somewhere? Do you wish to live in a particular country or city, or to have a certain job, or to become a photographer or an artist, a musician, whatever it is that you choose to do, a traveler. This is the perfect time for you to really embrace that without having to compromise with anybody. You don't have to compromise with anybody when you're alone. You can actually really focus fully on yourself. And so, when you're alone, you develop self-reliance and independence, which is something that the narcissistic family never taught you. And it's so important for you to take that time to learn self-reliance, to learn independence, to heal and just emotionally restore yourself, to fill yourself up, because healing is a lot more challenging when we remain in an environment that is harmful to our well-being. It's very difficult to heal because you're constantly on survival mode, you know. So, and if you throw yourself into another relationship right away, you didn't have time to get to know yourself. You didn't have time to fill yourself up, you know. It's not the same thing to enter a relationship when you're feeling empty and enter a relationship when you're full, when you're feeling full, when you took the time to fill yourself up on your own, you know, just for you, you know. It's not the same feeling at all. So as survivors of narcissistic family systems, you know, embracing solitude is in fact a need. It's actually a need. For a while, there really is a need for us to embrace, to go through this period of being alone so that we can get to know ourselves. And teaching ourselves, becoming mindful that being alone does not equal you did not abandon yourself, you know. And it's not necessarily that about you being abandoned, and it's more about you taking that time for yourself to really get to know yourself before you get back in the game, before you allow other people into your life. You really have to fill yourself up first, you know, really get to know yourself, really work on that personal growth and on your self-discovery without compromising with anybody, without tiptoeing around anyone, without making compromises. Like, you really should give yourself that gift to just, you know, be selfish for a good year or two, you know, if you can, where you can really fill yourself back up, and where you can have a treasure that you can share. Like, when you come out of that, you'll have treasures to share, you know. You won't be empty, you're gonna be full. And that's the whole point of taking some time to be alone and to embrace that aloneness, you know. Learn to emotionally rely on yourself, you know. Learn to, you know, physically also. I mean, learn self-sufficiency in all aspects of your life, you know. So this alone time is going to help you do that. So look, let's celebrate the benefits of solitude, you know. Let's celebrate the benefits of solitude, because it's in that space that you will reclaim your identity and find your voice for the first time. And remember, the most important thing is learn to love and trust yourself throughout this process. And by embracing your aloneness, you are going to forge a path towards a peaceful future. A future where you know who you are and you can really embrace your authentic self.